A warm welcome to Disky Talk with Luyolo. If you're tuning in for the very first time, I ask that you please do subscribe and hit that notification bell. If you've been a part of this journey, I hope you thoroughly enjoy this episode. So, on today's episode, I discuss all things Dstv Premiership action between Cape Town City versus Orlando Pirates. So, on today's episode then, I'm going to have a tactical preview of Cape Town City versus Orlando Pirates. But before we head into the tactical preview of this special encounter, let's have a look at how Cape Town City have fared out in the past couple of Dstv Premiership games. So, Cape Town City come off the back of a loss against Stellenbosch, where they lost 3-0, and then where they drew against Swallows. So when you look at their form and you look at their record within the Dstv Premiership, they haven't been doing too well. You know, if anything, they're struggling. And when you look at that squad from a qualitative perspective and you look at the players who are tactically and technically gifted, you look at that and start to think, what's going wrong at the club? You know, where is Coach Eric Tinkler struggling with regards to putting it together? Because they do have quality players there within that squad that can make a difference and that should be picking up these 3 points, but they haven't. They've struggled, you know. And when we look at Orlando Pirates, they come off a back of a 2-0 loss at home against Mamelodi Sundowns, you know, where they were thoroughly dominated on all fronts. And they just couldn't stamp the authority within that game. And going into this encounter then, I think Orlando Pirates will want to get back to winning ways, so as will Cape Town City. I think this is going to be a very, very interesting encounter, you know, especially when you look at it from a qualitative perspective. Technically and tactically on both sides, you've got very good players with Cape Town City and with Orlando Pirates. Options all over. So let's head into the tactical preview then. So the red team will be represented by Cape Town City, the blue Orlando Pirates. So when you have a look at Cape Town City and how they started the last time. So in goals, they started with Marquez. They started with a back three, and the back three then was Tariq Philis as the right side at centre half. You had Fasika playing in the middle of the three, and then you had Abu Bakar Mubara playing as the left sided centre half. So it was a 3-5-2, but would transition into a 3-4-3 depending on the phase of play. And when we have a look at this back three, you know, I think it's interesting that Coach Eric Tinkler would decide to go with this, you know, especially looking at the fact that he's got so many other options further forward within the pitch. So from a consolidation phase perspective, an incision phase. So when you go with the back three, you know, you're sacrificing one midfielder or one attacking player, you know, so very interesting then. And also when you look at the dynamic of it, and you look at Fasika, who played in between Abu Bakar Mubara and Philis, I think he's not as comfortable as a Philis or Mubara. And if he wants to institute a back three, I would then rather go with Mubara, because Mubara, I believe, is a libero. Very good on the ball, very good at advancing it. And the advantage that Mubara brings you is that he can easily transition the system into a back four, and then you can have him going into the midfield, then you have a 3 in the midfield, then you have 3 up front. So Mubara then could sort of allow Cape Town City to push further forward from a positional perspective and a spatial perspective. You know, that's what I would be looking to do. So that's the back three that he went with. So assuming that in this game he goes with the back three again, that's the back three that he would go with. And then in the midfield, he went with Mukeke. Mukeke started as the number 6, and then he had Mduduzi Mdantsane, and then there was Ralani as well. But whenever it would transition from an offensive perspective, you'd see obviously Ralani push a lot further forward, because that's what he's a lot more accustomed to, as opposed to him playing and starting within consolidation phase. But because he is a playmaker, he will often drop into the midfield, collect the ball, and look to facilitate that playmaking, creative style of play that he has, you know. So that's what they went with, you know. And when we then look at the wing backs, they had They started Edmilson as the left wing back, and then as the right wing back, they went with Mkhize, So an interesting thing to mention then in the wing back position, he could have also went with Craig Martins, and then maybe you drop a Fasika, and then you push Felix to the left, you bring Mubarak to the middle, then you play Mkhize as the right-sided centre half, then you have Craig Martin. That's also another thing to look at. In the left wing back position, you could also go at Terence Mashego, and in the midfield as well, there's Thabo Notata and there's Makola as well, so a plethora of options. And then up front, it was Fakhri Leke and Ajagun, so that's the team that they went with. But there's so many options when you look at this Cape Town City side. And if it were me, I would potentially look to change things. If anything, I would go with a 4-3-3 as opposed to the 3-5-2 that he went with. So drop Fasika and then have Mubara and Phillies, have Mashego as the left back. And then as the right back, I would go with Mkhize. And then in the midfield, have Mukeke. And then have Mukeke. And then have Notata. And then have Mdantsane, who then plays as the 10 come second striker. So you've got Mukeke as your 6, Notata as your 8, and then Mdantsane as your 10. Up front, have Morris as a point of reference, or you can go with an Ajagun if you want to. And then off the right, have Fakhri Leke, have Surprise Ralani, and then that is the 11 that I would go with and change things up a bit. I think Cape Town City are better suited to playing with the back 4 and a 3 in the midfield and 3 up front. I think they look a lot more comfortable from that perspective. But let's shift it back then to Eric Tinkler's preferred system in the last encounter, and let's respect him. So that's what he decided to go with in the last encounter, a 3-5-2, which would transition into a 3-4-3. And having a look then at Orlando Pirates. So they started with Mdantsane in goals, and they continue with their 4-3-3. They had Bandi Leshandu at right back, 2 centre-halves, Hlatshwayo, Happy Jele. At left back, they had Paseka Mako. In the heart of midfield, they had Musele and Mabasa. And then they started with Terence Chukamanja, but he went off. So in this game, I think Makubela comes back into the lineup. They started with Pule, Hoto, and then Mabasa up front. So yeah, that is how Pirates went about things the last time. But like I mentioned, I think Makubela comes back into the lineup. And yeah, but if there's something that I would change here in this Pirates lineup, I would look to have Mabasa playing as the right back, which then would make it a lot more solid from a defensive perspective, and tactically there would be a lot more discipline, because on the right hand side you don't have a fullback that just wants to go forward all the time. Sometimes it's very important to keep that shape and that discipline, and whenever Marco goes, he could always come in, and then it sort of becomes a back 3, which then allows them to keep the defensive organization and the tactical organization with regards to that. And then in midfield, you could look to bring in Nkanyiso Zungu, who's a deep laying playmaker, who I think would complement Musele very well. But there's Munare as well, and also a Fortune Makaringe. So there's many options for this Orlando Pirates side within the heart of midfield that they could look to go with. Up front, I'm happy with this 3. I think they create chances, and I think Mabasa is the right man who would look to obviously finish off those chances. So when you have a look at Orlando Pirates, I think they do have the players, and they're coming along all right. I think they're going to grow under the tutelage of both Mandla Ngigazi and Fadu Davis. My personal opinion is that I just think they need to get to a point where, as Orlando Pirates, as the management, they come to a decision, who is the head coach. Just come to a decision, appoint a head coach, so that everything is clear going forward, so that the head coach is able to work from a leadership perspective, as opposed to having 2 assistant coaches who are both at the helm. I think it also brings a certain confusion to the players. So just have a head coach which is clear set, and have a clear set way of doing things. But with regards to how they've been doing things, I have seen some positives. They're very comfortable on the ball, and at times they look very solid and very organized from a tactical perspective. So very interesting then to see how they come up against this Cape Town City side, which will look to trouble them. But when we have a look at the scope of the game and how things will play out, it's also one of those games that will shape up into a midfield battle, because when you look at the midfield players within Cape Town City versus the midfield players in Orlando Pirates, from a qualitative perspective, they tick so many boxes. So it's going to be a very interesting midfield encounter when you have a look at this game. But to highlight then the key players, surprise Ralani for Cape Town City and Mdantsane as well. Seeing how then do they go about with being the creative force for this Cape Town City side and also looking to score, because those are two players who have an eye for goal. And if Mdantsane can push a lot further up forward, I think he'd be better suited and better adept at that and creating chances and looking to occupy a vertical zone 3 within zone 14 and popping up into the half spaces as well, because I just think when you have him deep, it's a disservice to both him and the team. I think he's better suited when he's a lot further forward. And then when you have a look at surprise Ralani, if we go back to a normal 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1, where he starts off vertical zone 1 in his favorite channel, where he looks to come into the half space and beat players, I think he's better suited at that, as opposed to having him always having to come deep to play make. I think he's better suited at that. He's also the other key player. Having a look at this Pirate side, we've got Pule and we've got Mabasa. They struggled a bit against Mamelodi Sundowns and couldn't really get into the game where they could influence things for this Orlando Pirates side. So when we have a look at these two players, with the Bafana call-ups that from the provisional squad that they got, then I think they'll have that confidence. And also when you look at the past couple of encounters where they were both getting assists and both getting a goal. So Mabasa was getting the goals, Pule was getting the assists. So they will look to continue with that partnership and with regards to the form that they've had. So very interesting encounter going into this one. On Cape Town City side, you've got Ralani and Mdantsane coming up against Orlando Pirates key players in Pule and Mabasa. So very interesting game with regards to this one and how it might end up. And I think it's a very interesting game, because like I've mentioned, from a qualitative perspective, Cape Town City have the players, Orlando Pirates have the players. So going into this one then, I am going to give it to Cape Town City. I think Cape Town City will walk away with the victory here, and I see them winning 2-1 when it comes to this encounter. I see them getting back to winning ways, and I just feel that it's about time that they step up and they look to start finishing off those chances. So they've controlled games, at times they've dominated in games, but can you start scoring those goals again, because that's what wins you the encounter. So I see Cape Town City winning this one 2-1. However, from an Orlando Pirates perspective, I think Mabasa will get the goal. So 2-1 to Cape Town City for this encounter. So, ladies and gentlemen, do let me know at home, what do you make of this encounter? Who do you think will win? Do you think that Orlando Pirates will walk away with the victory? Or do you think Cape Town City will win this encounter? Or do you foresee a draw? So, thank you very much for tuning in to yet another special episode of Diski Talk with Luyolo. Signing out.